I'm not going to say done. I'm not going to say washed. Obviously, he's still put up really good numbers. He can still make plays, but I think that his yards per reception, 10.6, that's the lowest it's been in his career. He had how many drops against Miami?
And
Three?
I think he had two or three just against Miami. He had several this year for sure.
What are you getting Travis Kelce right now? Because he's somebody who has torched the Bills in the past. Think about the overtime touchdown. The 13 seconds game, it was so crazy before overtime. It's easy to forget that they were a knife through butter right down the field, and it ended with just a perfect throw, Mahomes to Kelce over Matt Milano, who's not in this game, obviously. So no Milano, and you don't have his backup. You would think that Kelce would just go to town in a game like this, but it's not the same Kelce, is it?
I have been a little bit bummed by the narratives around Kelce this year, and obviously a lot of them end up being Taylor Swift adjacent for just like having the craziest story of the NFL season. I mean, the most famous woman in the world, arguably. But I've been a little bit bummed by the narrative there because I do think a ton of the like quote unquote slowed down Kelce, which I think is somewhat fair. I think a lot of that is the Chiefs' fault. I really do. Because what happened this year is they came into this season saying Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore will be the guys who take pressure off of Travis Kelce when opposing defenses are game planning. Kelce's workload went down a tiny bit last year, like they were kind of trying to move in that direction to make him a not a part-time player, but not an every snap player. They go through that experience last season, and then again this offseason they come in and say Toney, Sky Moore, one of those guys are going to step up and take some of this weight off your shoulders. Then in the final practice before Chiefs Lions, he hyperextends his knee. He misses week one, and then he comes back, and then again in the Minnesota game, his foot kind of shifts weird in the turf there. His cleat gets caught, and he ended up coming back in that game, I think, but I can't remember when in the game it was. But that still, I wondered about how much that was affecting him for a while as well. But then it wasn't until late mid-season that Rashee Rice proved that the defenses need to care about him. And when Rashee Rice hit that level, he was the first player on the Chiefs offense who could honestly say that. Sky Moore was basically a non-factor, and Kadarius Toney was a net negative, and has been over the course of this season. So it's funny because Travis Kelce does not extend his 1,000-yard receiving streak while being the second leading receiver amongst tight ends this year. George Kittle now has the longest active 1,000-yard tight end receiving streak with one. That's the new active longest streak right now. So he ends the year like 16 yards short of 1,000, and he did it in 15 games because he didn't play in week 1 or in week 18. And defenses who seemed like they knew what they were doing just keyed on Travis Kelce so much in the first half of the season. And especially as the wide receiver issues became more evident, I think it may have even ramped up. Say, hey, if you let number 87 beat you, you should get fired on Monday because make it be somebody else. And a lot of defenses did that, and other guys got in the way. So I think that there is something to be said for coming up with the succession plan for Travis Kelce. I think there's something to be said for assuming that he plays 2 more years, finishes this contract, and then retires. He was asked about it in a presser a couple of weeks ago, and said that he intends to keep playing, even though there was some retirement talk in a Wall Street Journal story he did maybe a month or so ago. But I think the plan of him finishing out this contract probably still holds, and he is still awesome. He's deceptively slow looking in space because he's a I think it was Arif Hassan who said he looks like a gracious moose or a whatever a great what was the specific word he used, a galloping moose in space, something along those lines. That is stuck with me, but apparently not enough to
Yeah, he
remember
does look
both
like a
words.
galloping moose. Yeah, I like that.
He really does. And he also, if you've ever tried to tackle a moose, I bet it feels like tackling Travis Kelce, which is really unpleasant. So the drops are one thing, and that's not great. That doesn't feel like a great sign. The frustration on the sideline that we've seen at times, I think, has been a factor of how poor this offense has been and how invested he still is in all of that. So I bristle a little bit about like the end of Travis Kelce talk because I think he's actually been a better player than he's gotten credit for this year as the only real weapon that Patrick Mahomes could trust in this offense, at least until Rashee Rice proved it in real huge ways, which I think is still expanding now.